In this video, we'll be taking a look at the 2024 Senate map based on current polling averages from every single race. The map is extremely favorable for the GOP, with them not defending any competitive seats. However, for Democrats, there are many states where they're vulnerable, including in Montana, Ohio, and West Virginia, 3 states Trump has won by huge margins on the presidential level, but where Democrats are still fielding incumbent senators. And so today, we'll be taking a look at where both parties stand on the path to a Senate majority. We'll begin up in Washington, where incumbent Democrat Maria Cantwell is running for re-election. She leads by 14.5 percentage points, although according to the most recent poll, she's ahead by just 9. So the race in Washington could get surprisingly competitive, but for right now, Democrats are still the favorites, and Washington will be likely blue. Down in California, of course, it's one of the most liberal states in the entire country, and Democrat Adam Schiff is currently the favorite to defeat Republican Steve Garvey. This is the seat that Dianne Feinstein vacated when she passed away a few years ago, and Schiff is on track to becoming the newest senator from the nation's largest state. California is going to be solid blue. Next up in Nevada, we have the first competitive race on this map, where incumbent Democrat Jackie Rosen is running for re-election to a second term. 6 years ago, she undefeated the Republican incumbent Dean Heller by a 5-point margin. Now, this was during a blue wave year, so it's pretty unlikely she's going to do much better than she did in 2018. Looking at the polling average, Rosen currently leads by 9.4%. This is mainly a result of 2 outlier polls, one conducted by Rasmussen and the other by the Cook Political Report. They both have her up by double-digit margin. That simply is not going to happen. Donald Trump is going to win the silver seat on the presidential level, and he is going to bring Sam Brown up with him. So at the very least, it's going to be decided by a lean or even tilt margin. And so the Senate race in Nevada, based on polling right now, will be likely Democratic, but in the end, it's going to be significantly more competitive. Moving on to Arizona, we have another close race, this time between Ruben Gallego and Kari Lake. Lake was the Republican nominee for the governorship in 2022. She lost to Democrat Katie Hobbs, and Hobbs honestly wasn't that great of a candidate. Now, both Gallego and Lake right now are running to replace Kyrsten Sinema, who won as a Democrat in 2018, has since become an independent, and is simply too unpopular to field any sort of successful re-election bid. That's why she dropped out of the race, and according to the polling right now between Lake and Gallego, Ruben Gallego leads by a 6.7% margin. It's been pretty consistent throughout the election cycle. Kari Lake was not the best choice among Republicans, and yes, Democrats have had a streak of winning Senate races in Arizona over the past few years. We saw the elections of both Kyrsten Sinema and Mark Kelly, and now we're probably going to see Ruben Gallego win this November. It's simply a result of Republicans not choosing the best candidates. Kari Lake was popular within a significant faction of the GOP, but she is not as palatable to a more general statewide audience, and that's why Gallego is currently the favorite. Kari Lake is not even too popular among the GOP anymore. She was not endorsed by the Arizona Police Association, which did endorse Donald Trump in both 2020 and 2024. And so on our map, Arizona is going to be lean blue. Republicans can definitely win races here if they just choose better people. Before we continue, only 15% of you guys are actually subscribed, so please take the time to subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November. And follow me on Twitter for daily political updates. Link in the description below. Moving on to Montana, this is going to be the first race Republicans are favored to flip, and it's why they're in such a good position to take back Senate control after 4 years in the minority. Democrat Jon Tester is running for re-election to a 4th term. He won by a very narrow 3-point margin in 2018, but it's going to be very difficult for him to hang on here this November against Tim Sheehy. Sheehy is the Republican nominee, and he leads by 5 points in the polling average. In fact, he's led in every single poll since March of this year. So it does seem like Tester is on track to go down and lose a seat he's held for 18 years. When Tester first won in the early 2000s, the country was significantly less polarized, and you had many more instances of Democrats winning in Republican states and vice versa. But today, Montana is a state that's voted solidly for Donald Trump in both 2016 and 2020, and will do so again in 2024, and it's very unlikely then that Tester is going to win a 4th term. Montana will be lean Republican. This is the first flip on the map for the GOP, and with this flip, Republicans are already at 50 seats, considering they ended with 49 after the 2022 midterms. Meanwhile, Republicans are easily going to win the elections in North Dakota, Wyoming, Utah, and the 2 races in Nebraska, while down in New Mexico, we have a slightly more competitive race with Martin Heinrich, the Democrat, running for re-election against Dominici. Heinrich leads by 9.5%. He isn't the most popular senator. He's currently facing a campaign finance scandal, and so this race could really be decided by a single-digit margin, which would be significantly less than his 24-point margin of victory from 2018. So New Mexico is going to be likely blue, and it's definitely one to watch. Down in Texas, though, Colin Allred is not going to defeat Ted Cruz. Cruz is the incumbent Republican running for a 3rd term, although he isn't too liked by his colleagues or even the Republican Party as a Republican candidate in a red state. There's no doubt Cruz is going to be the favorite to win. He leads by 7.4% according to the polling average. In fact, 2 recent polls have had him up by a double-digit margin. Yes, Beto O'Rourke came close to winning in 2018 when he lost by just a 3-point margin, but O'Rourke really was a very strong candidate at the time, and he was running in a blue wave year. We don't have those types of conditions right now, and Colin Allred is not Beto O'Rourke. So this race is easily going to go to the GOP. Ted Cruz is going to defend his seat successfully for a 2nd time. While down in Hawaii, there's no doubt Mazie Hirono, the incumbent Democrat, is going to win re-election. Moving up to the Midwest, we have an election in Minnesota where incumbent Democrat Amy Klobuchar is running for re-election. She leads by nearly 13 points, which is just half of her 2018 margin when she won by 24%. Klobuchar is popular in her home state. She is on track to winning, but her margin of victory is going to be significantly less than what it was 6 years ago. Minnesota is going to be a likely blue state on our map. While in neighboring Wisconsin, we have a slightly more competitive election with Tammy Baldwin running for a 3rd term. Now she's running against Eric Hovde, and Hovde is currently down in the polls by a nearly 7-point margin. Baldwin leads in basically every single poll that's been conducted for this election. Just like I said in Nevada, incumbency does have a significant advantage. If you didn't have Baldwin running as an incumbent here, the election would be neck and neck. We saw in 2022 Ron Johnson, the Republican, get reelected in a Senate seat for Wisconsin, so there's no doubt Republicans can win in a state like this, but with the incumbency on the Democrats' side, we are seeing Tammy Baldwin with a slight advantage. That's why Wisconsin is currently lean blue. Indiana is, of course, going to be a solid red state with the GOP on track to holding on to the seat, while Michigan is going to be slightly more competitive. Debbie Stabenow chose not to run for a 5th term, and so we have now a matchup between Democrat Alyssa Slotkin and Republican Mike Rogers. Slotkin is a current member of the House, while Rogers served in the House of Representatives for over a decade and retired in 2015. And so both candidates here definitely have a good chance at winning this seat. The polling right now does favor Slotkin very slightly by a 5-point margin, although it's mainly because of some outlier polls, especially this one that shows her leading by 10 points. As a non-incumbent, there's basically no way she can win by a double-digit margin in a state as competitive as Michigan. And looking at the 2020 Senate race, Gary Peters, the incumbent Democrat, was expected to win by at least a 5-point margin. He ended up winning by just 1.7%. Polls have been known to overestimate Democratic support in the Wolverine state, and without an incumbent here, Democrats are vulnerable. Republicans could certainly flip this seat. Mike Rogers can definitely get within a 1 to 2 point margin of Slotkin, or maybe even win the race entirely. And so right now, the race is lean Democratic, but I would definitely say this is among the most competitive in the entire country. While in neighboring Ohio, this is another seat that Republicans have a good chance at flipping. Ohio is a state Trump's won by 8-point margins in both of the last presidential elections. Ohio used to be a state in the very middle. Now it is firmly on the Republican side, with their governor Mike DeWine winning by a 20-point margin as a Republican in 2022. However, looking at the polling average today between Bernie Moreno and incumbent Democrat Sherrod Brown, Brown does hold a very slight advantage. He is running for a 4th term, and again, incumbency really does matter. That's why he's even remotely competitive in this race. Looking at the average, Brown is up by 5 points, although polling here has also been known to significantly overestimate Democrats. Joe Biden was overestimated by 7% in 2020. Trump was supposed to win Ohio by just 1.4 years ago. He ended up winning by 8. And so looking at the polling average, we are going to place Ohio into the lean Democratic column. But again, it's definitely one to watch, and I wouldn't be surprised if Moreno came out on top. West Virginia, though, is certainly going to be a flip for the GOP. Democrats currently hold this seat, believe it or not, with Joe Manchin as the incumbent Democrat. He won by a narrow 3-point margin in 2018, but in 2024, he really was going to lose. He was going to run against Jim Justice, who was the only person that could actually defeat Manchin. Manchin led in polls against every other Republican except for the governor. And so Jim Justice won the governorship as a Democrat, has since switched to being a Republican, and is extremely popular in his state. And so there's no doubt he would have won even if Manchin stayed in, but now that Manchin has dropped out, Jim Justice is going to win by a blowout margin, winning by 30, maybe even 40 points in November. And so West Virginia is going to be solid red and the second flip on the map. If Republicans just hold on to all the seats they currently hold and win Montana and West Virginia, they'll be at 51 seats and will be guaranteed a Senate majority. While up in Pennsylvania, Democrats are ever so slightly favored, with incumbent Democrat Bob Casey leading by a 7-point margin against David McCormick. McCormick is actually a pretty good nominee on the Republican side, but Casey has been a long time Democratic leader in Pennsylvania, and he's pretty popular there. He is on track to win as the incumbent by a 7-point margin. The Keystone State is going to be very competitive on the presidential level, but on the Senate level, Democrats do have a very slight edge. Up in the Northeast, though, Democrats are the favorite in most of these races. Beginning in New York, the Empire State is currently expected to re-elect Kirsten Gillibrand. Gillibrand leads by 23 points in the polls. Democrats are also favored in Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Delaware, while up in Maine, Angus King, who's an independent that caucuses with the Democratic Party, he leads by 10 points. Democrats have their own candidate, so in a three-way race, Democrats are going to take votes away from King, but he is still no doubt the favorite. Maine is going to be likely blue on our map, while down in New Jersey, we have a surprisingly competitive race to replace Bob Menendez, who recently resigned due to being convicted of bribery multiple times. And so Andy Kim is the Democrat. He's running against Curtis Bashaw, and he leads by just 6 points in the most recent poll conducted for this race. A 6-point margin would be abysmal for Democrats, considering even Menendez, who is very unpopular, won by a 11-point margin 6 years ago. He had already been convicted of corruption one time before this, but after he was found out and caught again just a few months ago, that was more than enough to kick him out of office. And so Democrats are in a very competitive race in New Jersey, one they cannot afford to lose. The state is only going to be lean blue on our map. Maryland is also going to be surprisingly competitive, with Republicans fielding Larry Hogan, who is the former Republican governor who was reelected. He's pretty popular in the state, running against Angela Alsobrooks. Alsobrooks is currently leading by a narrow margin, but the most recent poll actually shows a tie between the two candidates. If Republicans somehow win this Maryland seat, they're basically guaranteed to win the Senate. There's no doubt about it. But as of right now, Democrats have a very slight advantage. And so just like New Jersey, Maryland is going to be lean blue. And now to finish up the map with the 5 remaining races in the Southeast, beginning in Virginia, where Democrat Tim Kaine is going to win re-election by a 12-point margin. Kaine was actually Hillary Clinton's running mate in 2016. He was ineffective at that, but as a senator, he is the favorite to win. Virginia will be likely blue, while in Missouri, Josh Hawley is on track to win by 12.3%. It's going to be likely for the GOP. Tennessee, though, is going to be solid red, with Marsha Blackburn leading by nearly 18 points. Mississippi is also going to be safe for the Republican Party. And down in Florida, Rick Scott is running for re-election to a second term. He defeated a pretty popular incumbent Democrat in 2018, with Bill Nelson losing his 4th term. Scott won by the narrowest margin out of any race on the map. In fact, nobody thought Scott was going to win. All the polls showed Democrats were going to hold on to the seat, but Scott somehow won, and today he leads by nearly 6 points in the polling average. He's going to win re-election by a lean margin at the very minimum. It might even be a likely race. Out of all the seats that Republicans currently hold, Florida is going to be the most competitive, and there's no doubt the GOP is going to hold onto this seat. And so based on current polling averages, Republicans are on track to flipping both Montana and West Virginia. While they're very competitive in Ohio, Michigan, and Arizona. The GOP is on track to win 51 seats, Democrats at 49, which means Republicans will take back control of the upper chamber of Congress for the first time in 4 years. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November, and join my Discord server, link in the description below.